All right, we're live. Welcome to issue number 4 of the 12-Cent Treehouse, talking about working in comics, TV, and movies. I am Sean McLaughlin, lollygagging in his office chair here. That's what I call going back and forth like this, lollygagging. I was a writer and producer. I worked on things like Johnny Quest and Batman and Superman and Justice League at Warner's, and I wrote Aquaman and Johnny Quest comics and a whole bunch of other comics, and wrote screenplays, some of which have sold. So that's me. Scott, who are you? Damn it.
I'm Scott Collins. I've worked for Marvel, DC, Lucasfilm, Dark Horse, whole bunch of stuff. I'm known mostly for my superhero work, like Thing, Freak Show, The Flash, Avengers, stuff like that. Patra, my creator-owned book, which I should really show. There it is. Yeah, and I'm just a comic book artist, and I want to keep doing it till the day I die.
I'm a comic book artist. I don't need to go through my resume again. I'm Jeff Johnson. If you don't know, then you don't care. That's Sean. What are you pointing at, Scott?
You.
Yeah, that's me.
You're talking.
Yeah. Thanks.
Oh boy.
And tonight we're going to be talking about things that Steve Jones and Sean know quite a bit about, which is acting and acting for, and that's Steve Jones down there. Steve has been around forever in animation and comics. And he also is a very talented actor. And Sean is a talented actor and a director and a screenwriter and a movie maker. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about how you handle the acting of characters in animation and comics. And since those guys are professional actors, I thought they'd be great ones to start this conversation.
All right. Well, and you guys have a lot of experience with acting. So go on, Steve.
Yeah. Well, a few thoughts in what was said earlier. Sean mentioned that this is issue 4 of 12-Cent Treehouse. So this will be the issue where Captain America joins the group. And
That's
Into the weeds.
Into the weeds already. Nice.
Jeff Johnson started drawing. I'm going to do Jeff's resume. Jeff Johnson started drawing comic books with me in high school when we sold our comic strip idea to our local newspaper, and they agreed to publish it in exchange for us doing political cartoons for them, which Jeff and I did not get or understand. Plus, we kept submitting unsolicited ideas that they had no interest in. Jeff particularly was amused at the idea of having kind of like nuns do bad things. Like, there's one great image where Jeff drew like a nun with like M16s or something, and I forget there was a tagline for that. What I think it was One Bad Habit. If I think Jeff drew a nun with 2 M16s and a cigar, and I think the tagline was what, because I had to letter it. I think it was One Bad Habit.
Wait, does that mean that Jeff likes puns? I don't know. Really?
I don't remember that aspect. So you're saying I was pitching a lot of political cartoons.
Well, I think it was all right. So they were wanting us. They had no interest in a comic strip really, but they had plenty of room to fill in the local paper. I think they were impressed by our moxie. And
Sure.
And then someone thought, hey, I've got a lot of ideas to make fun of local politicians at like the school supervisor, city councilman level.
Yeah.
Which of course Jeff and I barely probably understood who was the president of the United States at that point, let alone what was going on in local politics. So, and this is pre-internet or anything. So whatever photo reference they were sending of us of whoever these people we were supposed to be drawing, I'm sure we didn't get or understand. But I think Jeff and I felt like millionaires because we were getting $15 a cartoon for the political thing and $15 for each comic strip we were doing. Jeff and I were writing them together. Jeff was penciling, I was inking and lettering. Jeff would put in rough lettering, and then I would ink the lettering as well.
Old school.
And but I think we always talk. This is so important because at the ages of 16 and 17 or 15 and 16, every Sunday night we had a looming deadline I began to associate the sound of the 60 minutes tick tock, tick tock, tick tock as, you know, it's
Sure.
like, oh shit, you know. And
Pavlov's what?
certainly we weren't getting any homework done on Sunday nights, but we were.
Like we would have been doing it anyway.
Yeah, I was
No,
gonna
but
say.
And then every Monday morning.
I just want to
Yes.
say I've seen some of that stuff, and it's really, it's better than you're making it out to be. Especially your long series about the Lincoln Douglas debates.
Oh, sure.
Was really
That-
just
No,
I
I
was
appreciate
inspired.
that. Well, look,
That was inspired, for sure.
Look, Jeff could draw exceptionally well, even in high school. And when we met, we both had the dream of becoming comic book artists. And as soon as I met Jeff, I immediately went, well, I guess I could be an anchor. Like, you know, it was the sudden thing of like, wait, this guy's only 9 months older than me, but he's 9 years ahead of me skill wise. Like I had the presence of mind. Now, maybe this is the same kind of shoot for the stars attitude I had that allowed me as a kid to not dress up as Batman, but to dress up as Robin, because I'm like, hey,
Because
I'm
you
not-
thought you could be a sidekick, but not the actual hero.
well, that's certainly one psychology, but for me, I was so literal. I was just like, wait a minute, Batman's an adult. I'm a kid. I can't dress up as Batman, but I could be Robin. Robin's a kid. So
Yep.
it was maybe more of a almost high functioning autistic thought, I think, less than in my mind a self-esteem issue. But I think there's a lot to be looked at there from the self-esteem point of view.
Just tell me you weren't a 6 foot tall Robin.
No.
I mean, not in kindergarten. But anyway,
So that
Jeff Johnson's.
I if you want to feel better, Steve, I literally took a pair of green swim trunks and a red polo shirt, a bunch of crayons, an iron, a old sheet, and some gold paint, and made myself a Robin costume that I would wear under my clothes when I was 5.
What did you
I
paint
mean-
with the gold? Was it you painted
That's the
clothes or
stuff.
yourself?
The cape.
Okay.
I took a white
I love
sheet
that
and
you
I
were
painted
wearing it
gold.
under. I love that you were wearing it under your clothes so that you could spring into action if necessary.
Just in case.
Yeah.
At 5, it sounds like you and I were basically had the same dreams at 5. I only let them live out for Halloween, though I did. My grandmother pulled Incredible Grandmother of the Year also at 5 by she knitted me a Captain Kirk, yellow shirt with black trim and the frills around the edges. So I had my own homemade Captain Kirk shirt at 5 as well.
Go, Grandma.
That's cool.
So you
Did
could
you
be
put a-
Kirk, but you couldn't be Batman. That's really interesting.
Well, look, Kirk, yeah, that's it. You're right. It is interesting.
Yeah.
Did you
Lots
put a
to unpack
pillow
there.
under it to make it more authentic?
Well, look, it depends on what season you're talking about.
Sure.
How much pillow. Now we're going to have an expert on the show next week that could discuss what level of pillow Shatner had in each episode of the original series.
As Shatner grew.
Yeah.
Yes, but so Jeff started doing that. Then he drew a succession of interesting indie comics, one of which being a Star Wars 3D fill-in that I thought was particularly
I think
tremendous.
that's enough. We don't really need to go into all of the pre Marvel stuff. I mean,
All right.
not getting paid.
Then Jeff drew one issue of a comic called Stalkers for the editor Fabian Nicieza, who is the co-creator of Deadpool, amongst many other amazing things that he did at Marvel. And then Fabian was smart enough to give Jeff the job of penciler on Wonder Man, a comic, and now getting some important attention after a new series on Disney Plus.
Yes.
So there you
And
go.
Speaking of going back to acting, if we could, the acting in the new Disney thing is quite good. And they discuss it quite a bit, like the philosophy of the acting and what it means to be acting and how to create a character. And I thought one of the things that I always found tricky going from comics to animation is that the silhouettes that you have in comics for the poses and the acting and stuff are static and they work as ciphers for certain emotions. But if you try and do that same sort of posing in animation, it looks ridiculous. Like arms up, that looks fine in a comic, but looks dumb when you're animating it. And so the idea of naturalism.
That
Well,
that doesn't stop people from doing it when they're animating something, though.
Yes.
Even though it looks ridiculous, I personally hate hand and head acting in cartoons with the
Yeah.
No,
which is
I
all
mean,
just,
and when
we're paying money for this animation, guys.
look, and when Sean was an actor, he primarily acted with his neck and his upper thighs. He didn't use his head or hands at all. But sometimes lesser humans are forced to use their heads and hands on occasion. No, well, I to both your guys' point, I think we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Like in comics, I mean, this has become more true now, maybe in the post Brian Michael Bendis, more granular approach sometimes to the beats in comics. And Sean and I will have to get into the specifics of what a beat means for those that don't know what it means. But like very often, one pose of a drawing in a comic is going to could stand in for, depending on what your writer did to you, like a whole monologue or a whole bunch of different beats. And, animation is trying to be more like live action film or TV. Whereas if you've got an actor's vocal recording and they're giving you 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different emotional beats in their little speech, you have to have your character do all those beats.
Right, like a different bit of dialogue as a beat. Like if a character is angry in the first sentence and then regretful in the second sentence about that anger, that's two different emotional beats. That requires two different facial expressions, two different poses. And in comics, you can get away with a lot more of having multiple beats with one drawing. I think you can get it's.
Although
easier.
I've definitely done that at times where I saw that a writer had done that, where they wrote the first balloon, which is really happy, but it ends on a downbeat. And then the second balloon is like them angry screaming. I'm like, nope, that's 2 panels. I'm not drawing that as 1 panel. That's dumb.
Yeah, I would do that I would write that as 2 panels because you're it's probably too much dialogue in the panel anyway to begin with.
Yeah,
There's that too. Yeah.
So why don't we take a moment to explain? So when I was studying acting in college, like how beats were explained to me was it sort of like, let's say you got a monologue. That's the easiest way to kind of break it up. Obviously, this could be true in a scene too. It's going to be each beat is a sort of a separate self-contained emotion, and what I always found my acting teachers were like, it was there's this term called transitive verbs, that you were better off acting in action for each beat rather than emotion, so it's like, oh, okay, in this first beat he's seducing, and then now in the next beat he's bullying, and in the next beat he's bargaining, that you want actions that are actable rather than, and you're going to bring emotion to it or different things, but it's always better as an actor to be actively doing things that you are trying to actively get from your other actor or situation.
Totally.
Well, the action will lead to the emotion, or the action grows from the emotion. And so putting the two of them together shows that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different schools of acting, and there's presentational and representational. Representational is more what we think of as the American actor studio / Americanization of Stanislavski. Method acting is the bullshit term for it. Oh, smartly done.
That's a nice blast art.
Scott and I've been playing with blast art lately.
And what's the transitive verb there?
I mean,
Blasting.
I think I hate to say it, he's blasting.
He might be blasting.
And then
I know
presentational acting is where you work from the outside in, where you think about what the actions are, and then build your character from there.
right. Whether it's true or not, I remember in school people kind of talking about Shatner, who we've talked about before, being more of a presentational actor than a representational actor, and whether that's accurate or not. And then certainly when I was studying, like, Brando was still at the stage of being held at the highest level, of him or De Niro being more of a representational actor.
Right. So how does that translate into comics? Because when I'm writing a story, a comic, or a movie, I think hard about what's going on in that moment for those characters. What do those characters want in that moment, and what are they going to go for overall? And that's sort of the way I was trained to approach a character. You look at the things that character says, you look at the things people say about the character, but that moment is the most important thing, because if you can't play the result, you can't play what's going to happen at the end. You can only play what's happening at that moment.
Right, and the actors are. Go ahead.
I was going to say that when it comes to when it comes to doing the acting and when you're trying to convey whatever, like how the action is affecting the people around the character, right? That is a good way to show. So the reaction is a good way, like how they are reacting is a good clue a lot of times, if what's happening for the main character is not as simple as someone raging or blasting or doing something, right? Like the effect that they're having, I always found, was an easier way to like convey some emotion without necessarily having to nail the main character's pose or expression.
I'm looking at.
Since you mentioned reacting, again, just like a slight tangent here, that was one of the greatest lessons I ever got about storytelling and the basics and it was from Jim Shooter. Also,
we just lost Scott.
Crazy.
They didn't really want us to make this point about Mr. Shooter.
I guess. So when you're drawing,
Shooter was always really nice to me.
Yeah.
Anytime I met Shooter, he was really nice to me.
Shooter gave me great advice once at a show. He said that when you're doing exposition, the characters need to either be doing something really interesting, going someplace really interesting, or in a setting that was really interesting, even because the dialogue was going to be just exposition. So you had to spice it up. That's why so much of the Avengers stuff takes place in the Quinjet.
Yep. Scott, we lost you. Okay, we can't see you now. We can hear you, I think.
Are you in a coal mine, Scott?
Is there a canary?
There's always a canary.
I mean, we could go through a monologue, Sean, and break it down beat by beat, and then discuss how, how you might approach breaking that up in a comic versus breaking up the acting of it. If I was storyboarding it.
You guys want to do something from True West?
I was thinking Shakespeare.
Sure. Let's do.
What do you have? What do you have at hand, Steve?
You know what Steve has memorized is eggs and ham.
That's true. It's I just called up To Be or Not to Be, and there's a Richard III monologue from Act 4, Scene 4. That's a good one of a bunch of different transitive verbs that he's trying to do beat by beat.
Which is the Richard? What speech is that? Because I know Richard better.
It's Act 4, Scene 4. It's getting closer to the end. It's page 243, I think, where it's like Richard is talking to Elizabeth, and it starts with, "Look, what is done cannot be now amended. Men shall deal unadvisedly sometimes, which after hours gives leisure to repent. If I did take the kingdom from your sons, to make amends, I'll give it to your daughter." So it's sort of basically him trying to, talk this woman Elizabeth into, it's like, hey, look, all right, I know I've killed all your male children in my clearing my path to the throne, but hey, if you'll let me marry your daughter and you help sell this idea to her, look, grandma of mother-in-law to the queen and grandma is pretty good too, eh?
Yeah.
I like
like
that.
And your
yes,
and your family will become.
I killed your
royalty.
sons,
Right. Let's do
But-
that one.
Scott's back, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's
I've
do that
lost
I'm
one-
back,
Sean.
but I can't hear Jones.
Or can you not hear me?
No, you get,
I can't hear you
I don't know
guys.
what's going on.
let's do
Bummer.
that one line at a time, and then do a quick little sketch of how you would break it down.
I think they can hear you, but I can't hear you. Whatever reason, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Steve, what was the first line?
I can't hear Jeff either.
Oh God,
All right,
Scott.
I'll just sit here and draw.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear Sean.
Steve, are you done? Can you hear us? Oh, Steve is in and out. Hey, so Sean, do the first line of that.
I don't have that one memorized. Act 4, Richard, Act 4.
Yeah. That might be interesting. Or we could do something less academic.
I've got a script coming up here. I know this scene.
Scott, there's Blastar. Yeah, he's blasting. You can't hear, can you? Scott can't hear.
Yeah.
So Sean, you and I are talking about acting. Well, one of the things I was hoping Jones would talk about, and maybe you can still get him to talk about it, is the use of silhouettes and posing and stuff. And I found that in comics we had a lot more shortcuts for posing
Right.
and acting. Like there's always the grin and the yell, and the grimace, which give you a fair amount of simple emotion, right? He's happy or he's angry. But then there's, I think, always the different hand, like you talk about hand acting, but in comics, hand acting, especially if you're Gil Kane, becomes one of your major tools, like surprise, like the anticipation of whatever the action is going to be, you can often be squared away with the hand.
Right, but in comics, like you were saying, it's a moment frozen in time.
Right.
And with Gil Kane, it was brilliant at doing that kind of stuff. But in animation, it becomes distracting because it's all of this, and it's not really acting. It's just wanting to keep showing movement without any motivation behind it.
Well, and it's not natural. It's presentational, not realism, right? And so
Right,
it looks
right.
it looks weird in a cartoon. Exactly. It just looks odd.
Yeah,
It's-
but they do it all the time.
Yeah,
Swiping
in
Gil
cartoons?
Kane is how I learned how to draw an upshot of the head.
yeah, with the nose and whatnot.
Can I tell you my quick Gil Kane nose story?
Sure.
Years ago, I was at Comic-Con and
Who knows?
I got to have breakfast with Jose Munoz from Sinner and Sergio Aragones. And
Cool.
I didn't understand 3/4 of what they were saying because they were mostly speaking in Spanish. But Aragones kept trying to explain. Munoz was asking who was going to be there, and Aragones said Gil Kane. And Munoz, he kept trying to explain to Gil Kane, to Munoz who Gil Kane was. And finally, they both look at me and I go, and Munoz goes, Gil Kane.
Nice.
So, Steve, which scene is that? Act 4?
Scene 4.
Act 4, Scene 4. Okay.
So have you done a lot of, so Sean, I know that you've done some stuff for the stage too, as well as doing some acting in movies, right?
Right.
And he's done some
I've
stunt
done-
work.
And some stunt
Yeah.
work, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And Jones, you did a bunch of stage stuff too. When you're being directed and you're on a stage, do you guys think about your silhouettes much in your staging, like as you appear, or just where you're supposed to be standing on stage?
I don't think that's a good. I mean, I don't think that's a good thing to be thinking about while you're acting. It might be something that your director might be looking at, and like, I feel like good directors are maybe they're like constantly kind of watching stuff from all over the house, so they're kind of getting a look at like, what is this? Because you might. One great theater that I did a lot of stuff in was one that was sort of like half in the round, where the theater's kind of down, and then there's a bit of a like a audience proscenium. And so I think to me, a thing that, like, I studied acting in school, and then I got into drawing comics, and then into animation, and then I got back into acting a little bit after I'd been a professional cartoonist for about 10 or 12 years. And I found it helped my acting tremendously, because it made me realize that acting wasn't easier, but it was much more simple than I thought, than I had made it out to be before I had learned these other skills, particularly these other storytelling skills. And so I feel like, so what you just asked, Jeff, I feel like that's what the director in a play or in a TV or film, that's what they should be thinking about. And the actors are really, hopefully, only just thinking about like, how can I most honestly and truthfully like portray this moment and help tell the story from my character's point of view. And then the director should be the person on the outside kind of saying like, how does this look? What pictures are being made, while these people are the players within it,
Right. Right. As you get older and you have more experience, acting does become more simple, because you're realizing how little you really have to do or how little you should do. There's your homework. Oh, smart. See, but that's a very naturalistic pose. I can see a human being doing that pose.
Well, I mean, so I take Steve's point that the director, like the actor, they're not thinking about how they are presenting to the audience. But it seems like when you're a comic book artist or a storyboard artist, you are the director in a way, because everything you draw is presenting to the audience, and you have to make sure that what you're trying to present is what they're actually seeing. Right.
Well, exactly. Right. Like, as a comic book artist, you really are kind of the director. It's a little bit, it's not unfair, I think, to compare like a writer in comics being like the screenwriter in film, and the penciler, inker being, then they end up becoming the director, the casting director, the costume designer, the cinematographer, like about 30 of the most important jobs in the production. And in animation, if you're lucky, there's a whole host of people to do all those jobs, so that then, you as the storyboard artist, you sort of become like the director for your section. But then hopefully, there's already been a set designer, because Vince Toyama already drew some incredible backgrounds for you. And, and Andy Chang already drew all these props for you. And Shane Glines already did all these character designs for you. And so, so then you're just showing up and just telling the story and kind of being the director, because somebody else already made all these other decisions for you, that in comics, very often you have to do every single one of those jobs,
But you're also doing a job of interpreting. You're listening to the track. You're listening to the actor's track, which, no matter what you see in movies, the actors are always done before the movie's made. I know in movies all the time they show people doing ADR, and they think that's the way recordings are, but the recordings are done before the board. So, that's cool. Very Full Metal Jacket.
Oh yeah,
Sean, as you well know, and maybe because you were producer on so many of the shows you worked on, you ensured this, but I've worked on many a TV show where we didn't have the actors' voices yet.
Really?
You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, like I think you're just used to running a better railroad, you know, and maybe you had a greater emphasis on that from your own acting background or something, but I can't tell you the amount of times, particularly like since you moved to Buffalo or something, where like especially once Toon Boom came in and we started, you know, because once storyboard artists started using Toon Boom and that became a little bit of like the TV industry standard, then it's a classic. Anytime there's an uptick in a new labor saving device, you know, like it saves everyone, assuming everyone like levels up and then they get to it. It saves labor for about like 3 weeks, and then there becomes an expectation that like, oh, well now we just expect you to do more, you know. And so
yeah,
you know, say on Batman Beyond, if 3 acts would be about this much stacks of paper for a whole show or something like that, like it got to a point. Well, it got to a point where they stopped printing upboards, but then, you know, more and more posing happens, and then it turns into like, okay, well now you've got to upload the track into Toon Boom, and then you're drawing all the stuff to go along with the track. But say if you didn't get the track yet because you didn't work on a show that was produced by Sean, then very often the expectation was for you to do a temp track, or maybe your director did a temp track. Yeah.
I mean, we would drop in voices. We would have temp voices. Bruce, I think I did it once, you know, and then we would get the real actor in later.
Tons and tons of times I've worked on shows where I've done the track, or I've done a temp track, or the director did a temp track.
Wow.
Like, or that you just didn't have a track, you know, and then the director was maybe doing it in revisions and post, you know, assuming you got it before you'd shipped it, you know.
Wow. Scott, can you hear us yet?
Only Sean.
Okay.
That's weird.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't hear any of you guys, and then I just jumped off and I came back. So maybe try that. Surly Scott Collins. Oh, he can't hear me anyway. I'm just talking to the wind.
Yeah.
Steve said he jumped off and came back on, and that fixed it. He couldn't hear anybody before either.
I can try again. I did that once.
Yeah.
So that's a scratch track, right, Steve? That's what you call that?
Yeah. So
Sean,
but when you're doing storyboards, you're also acting. You have to figure out the acting in a storyboard as well.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I did the first appearance of the new Joker in Young Justice, and he was supposed to be. There was a really great design, but he was sort of like a crazy Dean Martin Rat Pack kind of character. I think he had even had a cane at the time, and so I was trying to figure out how he moved, how he would be moving differently than the other characters. And so I went home and drank a bunch of whiskey, and then read and acted out all the lines in front of a mirror to see like what is the creepiest Dean Martin-y kind of way I can have him move that sets him apart from the other Jokers and the other characters, because you wanted to have, even though because he had a great stagnant silhouette, how he moved had to be different.
Scott, you can't hear again? Can you hear me, Scott?
I had it for a second, Sean, and then it went away. I had sound, and then it went away. I'll try again.
So the drinking part, Jeff, was that method acting for you?
Absolutely. Well, because I wanted to be like, because Dean Martin was always hammered, and so I wanted to internalize what that, like, as I was drawing him, I'm like, oh, he feels like this when he's doing his weird little moves. Yeah. But so when you get the Jones, when you would get the script and you would be thinking about the acting, would you
in a story? You're talking about storyboarding or comics?
In a storyboard, would you?
Okay. Then, can you hear us?
I can hear all of you. Keep Bingo. Get rid of Surly.
Yeah.
keep Bingo, get rid of Surly. Okay.
Bingo Scott Collins.
Well,
Surly's
something.
Okay.
Now let's see again.
So Steve, when you got a script, Jeff was asking.
Yes.
How would you approach?
How much did you drink?
No, he didn't do that. That was only me. That was my method, Sean, for back in the day, and just for the Joker. Never for one of the characters like.
And just Scooby snacks over at Sardos.
Oh yeah, Scooby snacks. I did love a Scooby snack. So how would you approach getting the script? Would you read it and think about it and just sort of picture it in your mind, or would you stand up and try and physically act stuff out? Like, what was your approach?
Let's see. You're talking about, well, all right. Are you, because I guess there's two elements of acting that you're going to think about in a storyboard, right? There's going to be the action, just what the character or characters are doing physically, and
Right.
then there's their dialogue, right? So I would probably approach those differently. But Jeff and I both worked for a guy that worked for Sean, our friend Shant Nigagosian. So after Sean was a storyboard artist for Sean on Justice League Unlimited, on such classic episodes directed by Joaquim Dos Santos as Double Date, written by the great Gail Simone, and Task Force X, and many other great episodes that Joaquim directed. Sean went on to direct on Transformers Prime and was a showrunner on Kung Fu Panda Dragon Knight, which was one thing I worked for him on. And I think Jeff primarily worked for him on Transformers Prime, right?
Mm-hmm.
But something I thought was cool that I definitely started to interpret and take into my work, and it matched very well with my acting background, was that Sean recommended taking a script and then doing a beat board
Oh yeah.
of the script. So it's like, so before you go from writing to art, he actually recommended kind of going from writing to writing. And when you're, and so when you're talking about like then going through, say, so we should probably at some point, maybe next week, put up a script from an animated show so that people can see what the format of an animated series script looks like. It looks fairly similar to a screenplay, but Sean could detail the differences since he writes screenplays for a living. But so I'd go, so basically a script, for the most part, it breaks into scene description and dialogue, and then everything in the animated script, it will be like, all right, if a character, it might be, all right, if there's a paragraph of scene description, it'll be like, the Flash, and that will be all caps, runs across the room and then say every time something in the script that needs to be designed. That's a beautiful mole man.
It's great.
He appeared in Fantastic Four #1, by the way.
Into the weeds. Into the weeds.
If the show I'm producing or a script that I'm giving notes on, if there's a paragraph of scene description, it's going back. None of you guys should be saddled with a huge paragraph of scene description.
Right.
But sorry, Steve, that was just me.
Is Dr. Doom's first appearance in Fantastic Four #4? Let me look. Now I need to know.
Well,
I think
Steve was doing
Fantastic
that.
Four #4 is the Submariner issue.
Well done, Sean. Yep,
Nice.
That's right. I think it's #5. That is.
I think so.
It is,
I
indeed.
believe you're right.
It's Namor running with with Sue Storm in his arms.
Ooh
Well
la
done, Sean,
la.
well done. But so I would break down all the non-acting and just the action. I would break it down into like, say if it says like, the Flash, runs into the scene, runs into scene. He stops at the door, opens it, like we see him from another, then I would break it all into a beat, what Shantz described as a beat board, and be like, okay, everything that is not being said here, what is the language of shots that will tell this story? So I'd be like, okay, you know, I'd write wide shot of warehouse, flash runs into shot, you know, close up on door, flash's hand comes in and grabs doorknob, you know, cut to third shot, all black, then door opens, frame of door opens with, and now we see silhouetted flash backlit from light outside, like I would go through shot by shot of what's going to tell the story in the non-acting parts.
Yeah.
Then when we get to the dialogue, that's where the acting comes in, and that's where it would become very similar to how I would approach acting in a scene too, which is like, okay, say there's a chunk of dialogue or like a paragraph. It's like, all right, well, how many different acting beats exist within this? If it's like, if Flash is like, wait, what's, Batman, what are you doing here? Well, like that might just only be one pose, because it's more or less like him just sort of doing a questioning thing. But then it might be like, if Batman's like, oh wait, what the hell are you doing here, Flash? And then if Flash goes into like 4 sentences of exposition, there might be 4 different emotional beats that he's hitting, or 4 different, transitive verbs he's acting out. He's being defensive, but now he's going on the attack. He's doing all this different stuff. And so I would always just sort of create little boxes around each separate beat. And then I might write down ideas for transitive verbs or because each transitive verb would, I bet in Jeff's mind, would evoke a different silhouette, and then you're thinking of like, and then because it's animation, you don't want to be overacting, right? Like, and that would be as Jeff discovered when he tried to do animation acting that was too close to comic books, people thought that his actors were too Shatnery and not naturalistic enough, and
too posy, for sure.
But the style of the show that you're working on will determine that too. Probably on like Nickelodeon's The Loud House or Bugs Bunny or something, there's going to be moments of extremely big silhouettes, or Ren and Stimpy or something like that, where you want these big, giant, but still very specific and very truthful silhouettes. Run.
Very cool.
Yeah. But I do think, Steve, like bringing up the beat boarding, like that is like how that's how we learned from Sean, for sure, learned how to like break down all the little moments in the script and like your beat board. If the script was, if your scene was 8 or 10 pages of script, my beat board would often be 4 or 5 times that much, breaking down.
Back in a minute, I'm going to take a picture of something that will work with all this.
Oh, yeah. The real work is in the real work of
Jeff, you wrote it down too?
Oh yeah. Beat by beat.
Did you?
Moment by moment, scene by, and like even ideas for like, oh, this should be a close up of the hand, or this should be a long shot to show where everyone is in the room. Like doing the math and doing all the planning ahead of time, I thought it's interesting, Steve. I forgot about that part of it. That's where a lot of the decisions about what you're going to draw get made.
And it'd be really interesting to find out if Shant arrived at this on his own, or if because Shant worked with some really great people too. Obviously, Joaquim Dos Santos being one of the greatest. But they also were friends in high school, kind of like you and Jeff and I. I found it to be just a really, and I still now do it to this day, and I have found that I now do it with my comic book scripts, because I found that it still kind of works that way. It's totally. That because the greatest animation writer or comic book writer still doesn't quite write that way. Though I have to say that, Sean's script last week, the beat board for that might be pretty similar, because Sean did a nice job of, there was really generally only one action per panel. And right. And each written caption was only a sentence, maybe 2, and the dial, and so then you're doing a lot less translating than when someone writes you this big, oh boy, okay. this writer thinks they've described one panel or one thing, but there's 7 things in this. So, and
Right.
we
And
need
that
6
that
of
was
them.
years and years and years of learning that kind of stuff.
Sure. And I imagine
Plus, you also in
I-
your script, you weren't like jumping back and forth. You're doing a close up of a hand. Then we back out to a boat, and then a close up of a nail. You weren't jumping all over the place. You were doing all these like establishing shots, setting us in. So eventually, we got closer to the object that we were tracking along on the whole thing. So yeah, that was part of it too. I thought that you had already done that as part of figuring that part out. So it was already made for us.
Yeah, super easy to draw.
well, Sean, and I'm thinking in a perfect world, you would have been getting all this feedback from your co-creator,
there it
but
is.
I'm imagining you had to I'm imagining you had to reverse engineer this as you wrote scripts and then you saw what was turned back into you, and then you had to go, okay, that's not quite how I wrote that.
Well,
Um,
yeah, it's there's a couple of different things going on here. Well, this is a beat board I did for my romantic comedy, and what I did was I had several different storylines, so I had different color post-its for each beat, and they were keyed to each character's storyline, and then I put them on my office door here, and was able to move the beats around and actually sort of like see the movie before I wrote the movie.
That's cool.
Oh, that's
if
great.
I could read your handwriting, I think this would be incredibly informational.
Broken 5 times, folks. 5 times.
Yeah.
No, it's like what I love is it's like I think that says, does that say Mercutio? I think that says Mercutio.
It
Turns it into a
actually did
fun
say that,
guessing
yes.
game. Yeah.
Yes.
There you
But
go.
yeah, my acting and writing now is a lot more instinctive than it was a while ago, and it's more instinctive like what I did at the beginning. But now I have this background in working in television and film and getting an MFA in writing for TV. So I mean, I have a lot of that stuff in my head, so I kind of go. So like what you're talking about, Steve, with characters and stuff like that, I don't always do a beat sheet for the character because I'm trying to feel the moment. But
I think that you just described the creative process, though, right? Like it's that, me and Jeff and Scott, and Jeff and Scott really learned every chapter of How to Draw Comics the Marvel way. By the way, they even really mastered the boring chapters before just moving on to
drawing lamps. Yeah.
our friend Dan Panosian and I always laugh that we just jumped right to let's draw the figure, whereas like and Jeff and Scott,
here's the Don Heck chapter.
Yeah.
Jeff and Scott just went like, okay, they're telling me to draw a 747. I've got to do this,
But that's important. And that was when I did portfolio review for Warner's, and when I'm working with young writers now, they don't want to do, these kids, and they're on my lawn, and look at that cloud. But you need to learn that stuff in order to be able to tell the story well. And I really resisted that. I just wanted to do the fun, big stuff. But when I actually learned the groundwork, it became a part of me.
Look, the vast majority of us do. And I think part of why when I met Jeff at 16 and he was so far ahead is he had beaten himself. He'd taken this so seriously at such a young age that he had done that. And I think Scott probably did to a large degree too. And I think every other person, if you don't do it, you'll just do it later. You know what I mean? Like, then you just have to go back and then unlearn the bad habits you've gotten to relearn the basics that you tried to skip in the first place. But to go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, just
hey, this is private. But
his second balloon is get that guy.
Get that guy.
I think what Sean just described, it's that thing of, you've got to learn all the basics, and then it becomes you do 10,000 punches at the dojo, and then you don't have to think about them. Like a mutual friend of ours, told me they just managed to like do a whole comic like pencils, inks, and colors in like 2 weeks or something crazy, you know, where it was like he was doing 1, 2, a couple times 3 or 4 pages a day. Then he's having to color 5 pages a day, which is great. And he was proud of himself, as he absolutely should be. But it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, but it's 20 years of concentrated labor and focus that's allowed him to get to that
Right.
level where he could now do that when the pressure is on. He wouldn't want to do it that way all the time. And I definitely discovered after having done animation for 20 something years and trying to go back to comics that my first project, like, and I moved across the world and I had a baby and there's all these other different things that kind of came up too. But it's also, it's like, oh, hey, I've drawn some good pages here, but I can't just after 25 years of not doing it, suddenly switch to being able to pull out 3 or 4 pages a day. Even just nailing one, you know, in a day was tough at first, because you've just got to put in those hours on the mat or at the dojo. You can't skip those steps, you know, and so say, I'm still at the point where I find the exercise of doing the beat sheet really, really useful. But there might be a point where you're like, oh, I don't need to do it anymore.
Well, I go back to it. I
Yeah.
go back to the beat sheet. You know, if sometimes I need it, sometimes I don't. For this, I really needed it because I had 3 different plot lines that all intersected. And I really resisted doing stuff like that for a long time. You know, I was in acting school, and you know, we had the journals and the notebooks and write your character's history and all that stuff. And the last play I did, I just got the script and I said to the director, okay, I think the character is kind of like this. And he said, okay. But when I directed that film, I broke every single thing down and it was completely storyboarded shot for shot before we ever set on a foot on a soundstage or a location. It didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't always use those shots, but I had made the entire movie before we started doing the movie, and that way I had enough. I could set up. I knew I could shoot it quickly, and I had the freedom that if somebody improvised something or if a performance came off different, I knew enough. I knew it solidly enough that I could make changes as we went along.
I think especially if you're a low budget filmmaker, you have to have that level of because you can't afford, you know, you might only have locations and people and everything else for such a short amount of time. So you have to have made the movie at least one time before you made the movie, which what you just described. I know I was in this movie. I think ironically it came out before Sky Captain in This World of Tomorrow. So it's actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the first film that was shot entirely on green screen. It's called Abel Edwards, but it, and I know that the guy who directed it, he and the producer were 2 guys that worked in the industry primarily as prop guys. I think they'd worked on all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and a whole bunch of just big budget Hollywood stuff. And so I think I can say this now. Like, so to make the movie, there was a prop warehouse that they were working on some big budget Hollywood movie on, that they had all the props mostly out of this one area. And so they just set up this entire green screen thing in this prop area that already was. And then like you said, he'd already storyboarded the entire film, you know, so that when we went in, we were kind of just acting out his storyboard. And he especially needed to do that because he was going to have to construct and build every background in, you know, in the computer, since we were all just doing it in front of green screen.
What about mirrors? Do any of you, when I first started in animation, I was surprised at how many storyboard artists had mirrors in their cubes. Do you guys use mirrors? No, Jeff, you used to use photo reference, right?
I still do. I still have when I was like, I still have tons of pictures of all the guys from the studios acting out, like doing this kind of pose, holding that guy, pushing someone against the wall, or try all that. I have hundreds of those. But like when you would walk through the studio in any animation studio, there's always someone making a funny expression in a mirror and drawing it, and it's like the most ridiculous thing.
Yep. We really need to force Jeff to make a book of collecting all of our best Polaroids from the 90s. It would also be fun to do one where we did it next to the artwork too. You know, like it's like, oh, here's me about to kill Scott. This is the cover of Bloodshot number 12. You know, here's me posing for my own Punisher shot that Jeff took the picture of, you know, that I used for my Punisher cover or something like that.
Tons of reference. I have tons of reference of my friends yelling at each other in different poses.
Basically,
it was also great that we had an office space that had a stairwell in it. So when we needed top-down shots, everybody get in the stairwell, let's go.
I need a low angle or a high angle.
By far my favorite studio was that one. I think Jeff did this great.
Cool.
Oh, Jeff did this great comic in the 90s called for Image Studio called, I think it was like Blood Wolf Supreme Special, and
Legend of Supreme issue 4, number 4,
which is essentially Superman versus Lobo, you know, like, but the Rob Liefeld version. And I think Scott and I had so much fun because basically Scott got to be Blood Wolf / Lobo, and I got to be Supreme / Superman for a whole 6 weeks while Jeff had us like posing, punching at each other, screaming at each other. You know, Scott, there's some great shots of Scott tiptoeing, I believe.
Yep.
So how much, when you use photo reference like that, how much do you stick to the photo and how much do you use it and then work around it? Because there are a lot of people now who are just using it literally.
I think
verbatim.
There's I would always, so there were Polaroids and they were, you know, people dressed like we would use towel, like someone with a towel for a cape. So it's just basically
we weren't that buffed, Sean.
Yeah.
Some imagination had to be used even in the 90s.
Yeah, just, you know, it was that helpful reference of like, oh, that's that body language, you know, like I could rough the idea, but seeing someone actually, and this is where I had these guys act. Like I would be like, here's the scene, here's your moment, you're about to kill this guy, or this guy has accused you of something, like, and so you can get a little bit of that natural flavor from the pose and from the photo that translates into the drawing.
Yeah. Well, I think Scott and I, not to toot our own, but I feel like Scott and I were two of the better people that Jeff had at his disposal. I think Scott, maybe just from being such a good natural storyteller, and
Steve is saying we're both hams.
But you know, interestingly, like we got some help from one of our friends that was an actor, but because he was such an emotional actor and not really that much of a storyteller from other points of view, like he didn't get. I think Scott and I both understood that element that Jeff's talking about, where it's like, okay, we have to really exaggerate this in some ways to help sell a silhouette that Jeff's got there.
Right.
Because if I'm just going, hey, I mean, even that I did too good, honestly.
You can't help yourself.
Steve, would you call it more theater acting versus TV acting?
That's fair in the thing of like, because theater acting, I guess Jeff brought this up before, there is a greater element of silhouette maybe to it because you're having to act for the back of the house, you know, like it depends on the size of the show of the auditorium. But if you're acting at like a 3,500, you know, seat house, then the people in the back still need to be able to kind of like read what you're doing too, you know?
Well, it depends on the director and the director's concept too. I mean, I worked with a director whose whole concept was, he literally would say, I'm creating pretty pictures on stage. That's what I'm doing. That's what everything was about. And I worked with another director who was you guys can't care about what the audience sees or hears. You're hired because you're able to hit the back of the house, but you need to care about just what's going on stage.
So the projecting is automatic. You're not thinking about projecting. It just is part of.
And actually, every theater I've been to in the past 20 years, almost every one of them, they're all mic'd now anyway.
Oh.
You know,
oh, wow.
Which frankly pisses me off for, you know, all the years I spent in voice training. And all I ever got to do was hit star 8, star 60 and yell at you guys over the PA system at mornings.
Yeah, that was you projecting.
I wasn't late to any meetings after the first time.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I remember being a little bit surprised sometimes when Jeff brought, because we had access to a few other friends of mine that were actors, and they were all fine, but they weren't hitting that thing. And the interesting thing is, I don't know about you, Scott, but literally Silhouettes and Soda available at StephenBJonesCartoonist.com.
There you go. Silhouettes.
That it was only once I really got into character design and storyboards that I
show that one more time, Steve. Now that you're
sure. Now that I'm seeing a horrible close up of my own face, sure. Now look, and call my killer MODOK. It's Arnim Zola.
Right. So don't take that down, Steve. Like, that's one of the things I like to put. Like, one of the things I think is important about silhouettes is like each one of those silhouettes has a different character type for sure, but it also has, what they're like, an emotional quality to like what that guy, like, are they being brave? Are they whimsical or serious? Like, that's part of the silhouette is the inherent emotion.
This was the Justice League Sean wouldn't let me do.
Boo.
I don't think I was the one making that decision.
No, that's true.
And that's different than acting on stage. Is that sort of thing, because you don't necessarily have, or on film, the character should have an attitude, but it's not like you need to stand with your hip out a little bit more for that attitude. It's more what is going on at that moment, and that what the actor should project.
Right.
But in comics and in animation, you can do that a lot more. I noticed, God help me, I was reading
Indeed.
Blondie this week, and I noticed that the characters all stand with their legs bent, but they're in different positions, but the legs are always bent. And what it does is it gives the character an attitude, but it also gives the character weight.
Mm.
So it's not just it took me years of seeing that strip before I figured that out.
So they're about to do something, like they're not standing still. They're in a little bit of motion because their weight is down and they're about to take. That's an interesting bit of like communication through the drawing. That you're like, oh, there's that moment about to happen. Yeah.
Yep.
By the way, Jonesy, when you were mentioning that you and I were kind of doing the larger than life acting or whatnot going on with it, I just had the thought in dealing with it. One of the reasons why I think we had to do it that way, or we instinctively knew to push it that stronger, is in some ways we did have to act to the back of the stage, because when you make a comic book, all of those drawings are reduced down to not a postage stamp, but a trading card.
Yeah.
Those are the size of the panels. So you can't be that subtle with all that stuff when it's so small.
There's an element of that. There's also an element of the existing technology at the time we were using.
Bad printing.
Polaroids. Well, no, but also we were doing Polaroids. So, Jeff was only ever going to get something this big to look at anyway. And it wasn't something that you could digitally zoom in on now, like when we use our own reference. So
exactly.
That was an element too. But I realize now, like, we weren't thinking about silhouettes, but we were really giving good silhouettes.
But you were doing it instinctively before someone pointed out what you were doing.
I guess so.
Yeah, guys, we are at 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 44 seconds. Have any wrapping up thoughts? I don't think it would hurt anybody who wants to get into any form of the industry or comics or animation or anything to take an acting class. It's not going to hurt anybody.
Wait, Johnson, did you do any acting back in school?
Oh God, I was Vincentio.
he pretended to be a student.
Yeah, I certainly did.
He was in Taming of the Shrew, Scott.
Yeah.
Excellent. I was in a production of Pinocchio in grade school, and I was Scrooge. I was the lead in the play.
Ooh.
Nice.
So, but I'll bet you'll find that in a lot of guys that are in comic books, that in high school or in grade school or whatever else, they probably would have done stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like a proprioceptive understanding of what your physicality looks like to someone else. I think that's part of being a good storyteller.
All right,
All right, guys.
tune in next week when we discuss nuclear particle physics.
All right, that's it. See you next week for 12th Century House number 5.
All right, everybody.
The first appearance of Doctor Doom.